Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of our listeners are probably facing or have faced at some point, and that is job searching and career transitions. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from you guys about Linda Rolie's book, Getting Back to Work, so we thought it'd be fun to do a deep dive into some of the key takeaways and see what we can all learn from it.
Yeah, it's a really great book. And, I think what makes it so unique is that it's not just about, like the nuts and bolts of finding a job. She really delves into the kind of like deeper aspects of finding your purpose and, figuring out what you actually want to be doing.
Right. Like it's not just about sending out a bunch of resumes and hoping for the best. It's about being intentional and strategic about your career.
Exactly.
So one of the things that really jumped out at me was her emphasis on references. And she doesn't just say, have a list of references ready to go. She's all about like prepping them and making sure they're ready to sing your praises, which I'd never really thought about before.
It's so important. I mean, think about it. Your references are basically your personal hype team. They need to be able to articulate your skills and accomplishments in a way that resonates with potential employers.
Okay, so how do we do that? I mean, is it just like sending them an email saying, hey, can you be a reference? Or is there a better way?
There's got to be a better way. And Raleigh actually has a really interesting suggestion, which is to write your own WN letter of recommendation for your references to work from.
Wait, really? You mean like write a letter about yourself and ask them to sign it?
Yeah, basically.
Huh. That's
Uh,
actually kind of brilliant when you think about it.
It is.
It saves them time and it gives you more control over how your strengths are presented.
Exactly. It
That's
ensures that your references are, equipped to really sing your praises effectively. And, think about it from their perspective too. They're busy people. They're probably going to be a lot more likely to give you a stellar recommendation if you hand them a draft that already hits all the key points, rather than having to start from scratch.
That's a really good point. I know I'd be way more inclined to do that if someone made it super easy for me.
Right.
Okay, so speaking of being prepared, let's talk about salary negotiation. This is something that I think a lot of people get nervous about, but Raleigh has some really good advice that makes it feel a lot less intimidating.
Absolutely. And one of her biggest points is to never reveal your salary history.
Oh, yeah.
Whoever throws out a number first kind of loses leverage in the negotiation, right?
Isn't there a risk, though, in not disclosing your salary history? Like,
Yeah.
could employers see that as you being evasive or something?
I think that's a valid concern, but I think Raleigh's argument is that your past compensation shouldn't dictate your future worth.
Right.
Instead, you should focus on the value that you bring to the table. Research the salary ranges for similar positions in your field and location. You can use sites like Glassdoor for that. And then be prepared to articulate why you deserve to be paid at the higher end of that range based on your skills and experience.
Okay, so it's about shifting the conversation from what I used to make to what I'm worth now.
Exactly.
And it's about being confident in your worth,
Yes.
which I think a lot of people struggle with. Okay, so let's say you're in the interview and they inevitably ask that dreaded question. What are your salary expectations?
Well, before you even get to that point, you should be the one asking them about the salary range for the position.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. This gives you a benchmark for the negotiation, and it ensures that everyone's kind of on the same page from the start.
Okay, so flip the script. I
Right.
like that. It puts you in a much stronger position.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about something that I think a lot of people, especially those with lots of experience, might encounter, and that is being told you're overqualified.
Oh, yeah.
I have always found that so frustrating. Like, it's a bad thing to have too much knowledge or experience.
It can feel like a backhanded compliment, for
It
sure.
does.
But Raleigh offers a really interesting way to reframe this. Instead of seeing it as a weakness, turn it into an asset. Highlight the unique value that you bring precisely because of your extensive experience.
So instead of downplaying your experience, you should lean into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about the mentorship that you can offer to the team, the coaching skills that you've developed, maybe the ability to hit the ground running because you've been there, done that.
Right.
Companies value these things.
And it makes so much sense. Like, you're basically saying, I'm not just here to do the job, I'm here to elevate the entire team with my experience.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about references, salary, and overcoming objections. But something else that really resonated with me in Raleigh's book was the idea of company culture. It's not just about the job title or the paycheck, but how you'll feel working there, right?
Yeah, right. Culture fit is huge. And it's often the make or break factor in long-term job satisfaction. And Rolie gives some really great tips on how to assess this during the interview process.
So it's not just about them interviewing you, it's about you gathering information about them.
Absolutely. Pay attention to the interviewer's language, the questions they ask, the overall vibe you get. It's like a sneak peek into daily life at the company.
Okay, so that makes sense in theory. But how do you actually get a sense of the culture in like a short interview? Are there specific things you should be looking for?
Well, for one, do your research beforehand. Look at the company's website, their social media presence. You can read reviews from current and former employees on sites like Glassdoor.
Right.
Really get a feel for their mission, values, and how they present themselves to the world.
So it's like doing a little detective work before you even walk in the door.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And then, during the interview, pay attention to how the interviewer describes the company culture. Do their words match what you found online? Do they seem genuinely enthusiastic about the company? Do they talk about things like work-life balance and, employee development and growth?
Yeah. Okay. What about red flags? Are there any like warning signs you should be aware of?
Definitely. Notice if the interviewer kind of avoids answering certain questions or if they seem evasive when you ask about things like company policies or the work environment.
Hmm.
Also pay attention to their body language and tone of voice. Do they seem stressed or unhappy?
So it's not just about what they say, but how they say it.
Exactly. Trust your gut instinct. If something feels off, it probably is.
Okay, that's really good advice. So we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. Prepping references, mastering salary negotiation, turning overqualified into an asset, and even getting a feel for company culture.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much goes into finding the right fit both for you and for the company.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover in Raleigh's book, from crafting those compelling cover letters to, acing those sometimes tricky interview questions.
Well, lucky for us, we have more time to dive in, so stay tuned for part 2, where we'll unpack even more valuable insights from getting back to work.
Welcome back. Ready to dive back in.
Absolutely. So last time we were talking about company culture and, how important it is to find a place where you actually feel like you fit in. But of course, before you even get to the interview stage, there's that whole application process to tackle.
Yeah, the dreaded application process.
Exactly. And Raleigh spends a good chunk of the book talking about cover letters. I have to admit, I used to think they were kind of formality, like just a summary of your resume, but she makes a really compelling case for why they actually matter.
Yeah, I think a well-written cover letter can really be your secret weapon. It's a chance to kind of showcase your personality a little bit, highlight the skills that are most relevant to the specific job you're applying for, and really demonstrate your enthusiasm for that particular role and company.
I love the demonstrate your enthusiasm. It makes it feel a lot less like filling out a form and more like, you're actually connecting with a real person on the other end.
Yeah.
One of the things Raleigh suggests is creating an accomplishment profile, which basically like puts all your key achievements and skills right up front.
Oh, that's so smart.
Right.
I mean, imagine you're the hiring manager, right? And you're sifting through piles of applications. The ones that are going to stand out are the ones that clearly and concisely outline the candidate's most impressive accomplishments right away.
Absolutely. It's like you're giving them the highlights reel before they even dive into the full resume.
Exactly.
And speaking of making things easy for the reader, Raleigh also mentions using boldface type to make your references stand out. So it's not just about the content, it's also about the visual presentation.
Yeah, visual presentation matters. A cluttered or poorly formatted application can be really overwhelming to a hiring manager. You want to make it easy for them to navigate and quickly find the information they need.
And think about it. If they're impressed with how organized and, well presented your application is, they're probably going to assume you bring those same qualities to your work, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about attention to detail and professionalism.
Okay, so let's say you've nailed the application and you've landed an interview. Now you've got to tackle those sometimes dreaded interview questions.
The interview.
Yes. And there's one that always trips me up. It's that classic, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Like it feels so open-ended. Where do you even begin?
Yeah, it's a classic for sure. And it can be tricky because you don't want to just rehash your resume,
Right, right.
Raleigh suggests using what she calls the P technique, which is basically structuring your answer around a problem you faced, the action you took to address it, and the positive result you achieved.
So instead of saying, like, I'm a hard worker with strong communication skills,
Yep.
you give a specific example of a time you actually demonstrated those qualities in, like a real work situation.
Exactly. It's about showing, not just telling.
Yeah.
And it gives the interviewer a glimpse into your problem-solving abilities and how you actually add value.
Okay, so story time. It makes this so much more memorable, too. Okay, what about that other classic, what are your weaknesses? I feel like everyone dreads this one.
It's a tough one, for sure. But honesty and self-awareness are key.
Hmm.
Don't try to disguise a strength as a weakness. It's going to come across as inauthentic.
Right. Yeah.
Choose a real weakness, but one that you're actively working to improve.
Mm.
Frame it in a positive light.
So, like, instead of saying, I'm sometimes too detail-oriented, you could say, I've learned that, sometimes I need to delegate more effectively so I can focus on the big picture.
Exactly. It shows that you're capable of self-reflection and committed to continuous improvement, which are really valuable qualities in any employee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It takes the sting out of admitting a weakness, too, because you're showing that you're proactive about addressing it. Speaking of being proactive, Raleigh really emphasizes the importance of asking intelligent questions during an interview. It's not just about them grilling you. It's about you gathering information and showing that you're engaged and, that you've done your homework.
Yeah, I think asking thoughtful questions really demonstrates your interest in the company and your understanding of the role. It's an opportunity to kind of showcase your critical thinking skills and make a lasting impression.
It's like you're saying, I'm not just here to take a job, I'm here to learn and contribute.
Exactly.
But what kinds of questions should you be asking?
Well, Raleigh provides a great list of potential questions in the book.
Hmm.
Everything from clarifying the job responsibilities to really understanding the company culture. You can ask about opportunities for professional development, the company's long-term goals, or even how they foster a positive work environment.
So it's about showing that you've done your homework and that you're genuinely curious about the company and the role. Now, here's a question I bet a lot of listeners struggle with. Why do you want to work here? Because it can be so tempting to just like give a generic answer.
Oh, yeah. Don't fall into that trap. This is your chance to really shine. Go beyond those generic platitudes and really demonstrate like a deep understanding of the company's mission, their values, their culture. Explain how their work resonates with you personally and why you think your skills and experience are a good fit for their specific needs.
So it's about connecting the dots between your passions and their mission, like showing them that you're not just looking for any job, you're looking for this job.
Exactly.
Right.
And don't be afraid to show your enthusiasm. Employers want to see that you're genuinely excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, enthusiasm is contagious. Okay, let's tackle another big one. Salary negotiation. We talked about it briefly in the last part, but there's so much more to unpack here.
It's a crucial step. And it's something that I think a lot of people, myself included, used to feel really uncomfortable with. But Raleigh offers some advice that makes it feel a lot more approachable. It's really about knowing your worth and advocating for fair compensation.
And one of her key pieces of advice is to defer discussing salary for as long as possible. Like, don't bring it up until the employer does. Why is that so important?
Well, it's about maintaining your leverage. You don't want to anchor the negotiation at a number that might be lower than what the company's willing to offer. And if they press you for your salary history, which we talked about earlier, you can politely deflect and just reiterate your interest in discussing salary once you've had a chance to, determine that it's a good fit for both of you.
Okay, so it's about timing and, being strategic about when you bring it up.
Yeah.
And what if they do ask about your salary expectations? Should you give them like a specific number or a range?
Raleigh suggests providing a range rather than a specific number. This gives you a little bit of flexibility, and it prevents them from kind of lowballing you based on your previous earnings.
Right, right. So you're not boxing yourself in too early. Okay, now, what if they come back with an offer that's lower than you'd hoped for?
Don't despair. This is where the real negotiation begins. And remember, everything is negotiable. Be prepared to counter their offer and advocate for what you deserve.
Do you have any tips on how to actually frame that counteroffer? Because I know I would be nervous about, coming across as demanding or ungrateful.
Absolutely. Raleigh suggests focusing on, your skills, your experience, and the value that you're going to be bringing to the company. So, for example, you can say something like, based on my proven track record, and insert relevant skill here, and my ability to insert, key accomplishment here, I believe a salary of insert your desired range here, is more in line with the value I'll be bringing to the team.
Okay, so it's about framing it as like a win-win, not an ultimatum. Yeah.
Exactly. And, if the salary just isn't budging, don't be afraid to get a little creative and negotiate for other benefits. Things like, extra vacation time or flexible work arrangements or maybe professional development opportunities.
Oh, that's a great point. It's not just about the money. It's about creating a compensation package that really supports your, overall well-being and career goals.
Right. And in today's job market, I think more and more employers are open to flexible work arrangements. So don't be afraid to ask for what you need.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot: cover letters, interview questions, salary negotiation, crafting the perfect counteroffer. But something else that really stood out to me in Raleigh's book was the chapter that she dedicates specifically to veterans who are transitioning to civilian careers. This can be a really challenging transition, and I thought she offered some really great advice.
It's so true. I mean, veterans have such unique skills and experiences, but sometimes it can be hard to translate those into like civilian
Hmm.
terms. Raleigh really emphasizes the importance of, first of all, identifying your core competencies, then translating any, military jargon into civilian language,
Hmm.
and then really showcasing those transferable skills that are going to be highly valued in, the workplace.
Like, you know, leadership, teamwork, problem solving, adaptability. I mean, those are all qualities that are honed through military service that are just incredibly valuable in any industry.
Exactly. And Raleigh, provides specific strategies for how to highlight those skills in your resume and cover letter, and also during interviews.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of listing your military ranks and acronyms, focus on the, leadership roles you held, the teams you managed, the specific outcomes you achieved.
So it's about telling the story behind the jargon, so to speak. And I
Hmm.
love that Raleigh encourages veterans to, really leverage their networks and seek out resources that are specifically designed to support that transition to civilian careers. Because there are a lot of them out there.
Absolutely. There are so many organizations and programs that are dedicated to helping veterans navigate this process. Everything from resume writing and interview prep to job placement assistance.
Yeah, it's a great reminder that you don't have to go through this alone. There's a whole community of people ready to support you. Okay, so let's say you've gone through all the steps. You've aced the interview, negotiated the salary, and finally, you have a job offer. But before you pop the champagne,
Hold on. Rolie urges us to really take a breath and analyze the offer carefully before accepting. It's not just about saying yes to a job. It's about making sure it's the right job for you.
that makes total sense. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of getting an offer and just kind of jump at the first thing that comes along. But how do you actually go about analyzing a job offer? What are the key things to consider?
Well, for one, consider the total compensation package.
Yeah.
It's not just about the base salary, it's about the benefits, the vacation time, the retirement plan, all those other perks that are important to you. And Raleigh provides a framework for, evaluating all these factors and really assessing whether the offer truly aligns with your needs and your expectations.
Okay, so it's about looking at the whole picture, not just the dollar amount on the offer letter.
Exactly. And equally important, if not more so, is the company culture. We talked about this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. Does the company's mission and values and work environment really align with your own?
Right, because even if the salary and benefits are amazing, if you're going to be miserable in the work environment, it's not going to be a good fit long term.
Exactly. And so, Raleigh suggests kind of revisiting your research on the company and, really trusting your gut instinct. Did you notice any red flags during the interview process? Do you have any lingering doubts?
Okay, so it's about doing your due diligence and making sure this is a place where you can really see yourself thriving, not just surviving.
Yes.
What about career growth? Should you be thinking about that when you're evaluating an offer?
Oh, absolutely. Think about your long-term career goals and aspirations. Does this position offer opportunities for growth and advancement? Does it align with your overall career trajectory?
It's like you're saying, don't just look at the job you're being offered today, look at the potential it holds for your future.
Exactly. It's about taking that strategic, long-term view of your career path. Okay, so we've talked about analyzing job offers, but let's get down to brass tacks. Once you've decided that this is the right opportunity for you, how do you actually go about accepting the offer?
Yeah, what's the protocol?
Well, first of all, express your enthusiasm and gratitude to the hiring manager. Let them know that you're, excited about the opportunity and you appreciate their time and consideration.
Okay, so basic manners.
Always. And then, If you're happy with the terms of the offer, formally accept it in writing, either through email or a signed offer letter. However, if there are any aspects of the offer that you would like to negotiate, this is the time to do it.
Okay, so we've talked about salary negotiation, but are there other things you can negotiate at this stage?
Absolutely. You can negotiate things like your start date, maybe your vacation time, relocation expenses, even, professional development opportunities. And Raleigh provides some great, scripts and strategies for approaching these conversations in a professional and respectful manner.
So it's about advocating for your needs while still maintaining, a positive relationship with the company.
Exactly. And then once you've reached an agreement, make sure you get everything in writing,
Yeah.
including the salary, the benefits, the job responsibilities, any other, agreed upon terms.
Okay, so it's all about clarity and transparency from both sides. Wow, we've covered so much ground in this second part of our deep dive. From crafting compelling cover letters and acing those interviews to negotiating job offers and evaluating company culture, I mean, Rowley provides such a wealth of, practical advice and actionable strategies for navigating every stage of the job search process.
It's really a comprehensive guide to finding not just a job, but the right job for you.
Right.
And while we've covered a lot of the practical aspects, I think there's another really crucial element to this whole job search journey, the emotional side. Because let's face it, job searching can be a roller coaster ride.
Oh, it totally is. It can be exciting and exhilarating, but also like really stressful, frustrating, even like downright discouraging at times.
Exactly. You're putting yourself out there constantly, and rejection is just, it's tough to handle.
Yeah, rejection is definitely part of the process. So how do we deal with that? Because it can be really easy to get caught up in the negativity, especially if you're, facing a lot of rejections or it's been like a really long job search. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've talked about a lot of the, practical strategies when it comes to job searching, resumes, interviews, negotiation. But now I want to kind of shift gears and talk about something that I think is often overlooked, and that's the emotional side of this whole process.
Yeah, it's so important to acknowledge, like, the emotional roller coaster that can come with, even a really positive job search.
Right.
Even when it's ultimately successful, you find a new job, you're excited about it, there can still be a lot of stress and self-doubt, even a sense of loss sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's something people don't talk about enough. It's like you're saying goodbye to, an old version of yourself, even if it's for the better.
Exactly. And Raleigh actually talks about how even, like, positive change can trigger those stages of grief.
Hmm.
Denial, anger, bargaining, all of that.
So how do we deal with that? It's so easy to get caught up in the negativity, especially if you're like facing rejections or it's been a really long job search.
Well, one thing Raleigh really emphasizes is the importance of having a support system. Don't go through this alone. Reach out to friends, family, mentors, anyone who can offer encouragement and just like a listening ear.
It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad.
Exactly. And on the flip side, be that person for others who might be going through something similar. Because sometimes just knowing you're not alone can make all the difference.
Oh, absolutely. And what about when you're just feeling like burnt out and discouraged? Because I know I've definitely hit those walls during job searches.
Yeah, it's so common. And Raleigh talks a lot about the importance of self-care, which can be really easy to neglect when you're, feeling stressed and overwhelmed. But it's crucial to prioritize your well-being, both physically and emotionally.
So, what does self-care actually look like during a job search? Is it bubble baths and face masks, or is it something like deeper than that?
I mean, it can definitely be those things. But it's also about, making time for activities that nourish your mind, body, and spirit. Maybe it's, going for a walk in nature or spending time with loved ones or reading a good book or maybe pursuing a hobby that you really enjoy. Whatever it is, make sure you're carving out time for those things that like fill your cup, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself so you can, show up as your best self during this whole process.
Exactly. And that also includes, managing your expectations.
Yeah.
Because rejection is just part of the process. And it's important to like reframe it as redirection.
Ooh, I love that. Rejection as redirection. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So, not every job is meant for us. And sometimes a no is simply a redirection towards a better opportunity. It's about trusting that, things happen for a reason and that you're on the right path, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time.
That's such a powerful mindset shift. Instead of seeing rejection as like a failure, you're seeing it as an opportunity for growth and learning.
Exactly. And that actually ties into another really important theme that Raleigh explores, which is finding your purpose in work.
This is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially during times of transition. Like, how do you actually figure out what your purpose is?
Well, Raleigh encourages us to really reflect on our values,
Mm.
our passions, and our skills. What are you naturally good at? What do you really enjoy doing? What kind of impact do you want to make on the world?
So it's like you're saying, let's figure out who you are and what lights you up, and then find a career that aligns with that.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process. Our passions and priorities might evolve over time, and that's okay. It's about being open to new possibilities and, continuously learning and growing.
I love that. It's not about, finding the perfect job. It's about finding a path that feels authentic and meaningful to you.
Exactly. And Raleigh reminds us that it's not just about, the job itself. It's about designing a life that you love.
Yeah, that really resonated with me too. It's about finding that balance, right?
Mm.
Between work and relationships and personal growth and, your own well-being, all of it.
Exactly. It's about creating a life that feels whole and fulfilling, where work is a part of that, but not the only thing.
And Raleigh gives us the tools and the inspiration to make that happen.
She really does. It's been great revisiting her work with you.
Me too. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into getting back to work, I just want to reiterate that, you have the power to create a career and a life that you truly love.
Absolutely. It takes effort and resilience and a willingness to, keep learning and growing, but it's absolutely possible.
So if there's one thing you take away from this deep dive, let it be this. Don't be afraid to dream big. Don't let fear or self-doubt hold you back.
Believe in yourself, trust the journey, and embrace the possibilities.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Until next time, keep diving deep.